The air in the garage was thick with the scent of sawdust, burnt coffee, and crushing failure. Dust motes danced in the single, weak shaft of morning sun cutting across the concrete floor, illuminating the crude sign tacked above a workbench, Patterson Woodworks, established 2018. Ethan Patterson, 32, ran a calloused thumb over the grainy surface of a half-finished oak table. He wasn't looking at the wood, he was looking at the ghost of the number that haunted him, the crisp, clean, devastating number scrawled on the eviction notice taped to the refrigerator inside. $10,000. That money wasn't just debt, it was a memorial to arrogance. 2 months prior, Ethan had taken a massive, ill-advised loan, a desperate attempt to scale his fledgling custom furniture business, betting everything on a flawed bulk order from a fly-by-night distributor he hadn't properly vetted. The distributor vanished, the loan remained, and now the bank was done negotiating. He leaned his head back against the cold cinder block wall, the rough texture mirroring the ache in his chest. The $10,000 mistake. It wasn't the sum that broke him, it was the symbol. He had chased the American dream of being his own boss, trading a safe corporate ladder for the grit of creation, only to trip spectacularly on his own ambition. The failure wasn't just financial, it was a profound public judgment on his competence, his vision, his entire identity. His wife, Clara, a kindergarten teacher whose steadiness was the only thing keeping their world from spinning into chaos, walked in quietly. She didn't have to say anything. The soft sigh she let out told him she'd seen the notice. "Ethan," she said, her voice gentle, "what are we going to do?" He wanted to lie, to promise a miracle, but the lie wouldn't stick. "I don't know, Clara. I've sent out 5 resumes, cold called 20 shops. Nobody is hiring a guy who just tanked his own business, not at the salary we need." He saw the fear flicker in her eyes, quickly replaced by that stubborn, beautiful resilience he'd always admired. "Then we don't look for a job, Ethan. We find a way to pay the debt." "With what? The equipment is mortgaged, the shop is worthless. I have nothing left to sell but my pride, and I've already discounted that to 0. Clara walked over to the workbench, picked up a discarded scrap of beautiful dark walnut, and turned it in her hands. "You still have this, Ethan. You still have the hands that made our kitchen table. You made the cradle for our daughter, Lily. That wasn't a mistake. That was art. That was you." Her words were a tiny, persistent ray of light in his self-made darkness. He had focused so intently on the $10,000 hole that he had forgotten the skill that got him here, the skill that, paradoxically, could also dig him out. The turning point wasn't a grand revelation. It was a mundane act of desperation. That afternoon, Ethan looked at his tools, not as assets to be liquidated, but as weapons for war. He didn't have the capital for big orders, but he still had lumber scraps, a small sander, and a crippling deadline. He took that piece of walnut Clara had held. Instead of trying to build a new dining table, a project that required too much time and material, he meticulously cut, sanded, and polished the scrap into a single, elegant wooden phone stand. It was small, functional, and required minimal overhead. He focused all the meticulous detail he usually reserved for a $5,000 commission into a $25 item. He posted a picture of it online with a caption stripped of all pretense, a raw confession that felt terrifyingly honest. "This is what I do now. Small steps back from a big mistake. Small steps back. Small steps back from a big mistake. Hand-polished walnut phone stands. Every purchase helps save my family business." He sold 3 that evening, $75. It was insignificant against $10,000, but the feeling was seismic. The shame was replaced by a flickering ember of self-respect. He hadn't asked for a handout, he had sold a piece of his craft. This became his new obsession, discipline over desperation. Ethan scrapped the big, impossible dream for 1,000 tiny, achievable goals. He started waking up at 4:30 a.m., not to fret, but to work. He wasn't building furniture, he was building a brand on transparency and grit. He dedicated his days to creating small, functional, beautiful household goods, cutting boards, engraved coasters, bespoke shelf brackets, things people needed and could afford. He filmed short videos in the imperfect light of his garage, showing the sanding process, the oil finish, the meticulous care he put into every $50 object. He didn't hide his story, he wove the mistake into the narrative. "This grain represents a failure I had last year," he narrated in one video, running his hand over a knot in the wood. "But just like this wood, you don't throw it out. You work around it, you polish it, and you turn it into a feature. My mistake cost me $10,000, but the lesson it taught me, that's priceless." His honesty resonated. American audiences crave authenticity, and Ethan was giving them the unvarnished truth of a man fighting for his home. People didn't just buy the product, they bought the story of redemption. They were investing in Ethan's comeback. The next few months were a blur of sawdust, sleepless nights, and the exhilarating sting of progress. He focused relentlessly on shipping quality, replying to every comment and delivering every item with a handwritten note thanking them for the lifeline. The income started growing, steady and predictable. $500 one week, then $800, then $1,200. The debt wasn't shrinking fast enough, but the anxiety was. Then came the rejection that felt like a punch in the gut. He applied to sell his items at a prestigious national craft fair, a massive opportunity for exposure. The reply was a sterile, impersonal email. "Your current product line lacks the necessary wow factor for our curated selection. Focus on larger statement pieces." The old Ethan would have crumpled. He would have seen it as confirmation that his current strategy was a failure, that he was destined to be a niche craftsman forever. But the new Ethan, forged in the heat of his $10,000 mistake, reacted differently. He felt the sting, yes, but he didn't stop sanding. He realized their critique was based on the old definition of his business. His wow factor wasn't the size of the piece, it was the story behind it. He doubled down on his online community. He ran a live stream showing his process, discussing the rejection openly, and asking his followers what they truly valued. Their response was unanimous. They loved the small, perfectly executed, meaningful pieces. They loved the connection. Ethan understood. He wasn't competing against other furniture makers anymore. He was competing in the space of authentic human connection and personal triumph. The climax arrived 7 months after the eviction notice. Ethan and Clara sat at their kitchen table, the lamp casting a warm glow on the stacks of neatly organized receipts and deposit slips. The original notice was still taped to the fridge, now covered in post-it notes tracking their daily progress. Ethan slid the final ledger sheet toward Clara. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the immense weight of the moment. "We made the final payment this morning," he whispered. "The bank approved the transfer. It's done. The $10,000 is gone." Clara didn't cheer or cry immediately. She just stared at the number, tracing it with her finger, the number that held their future hostage. Then she looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We saved the house, Ethan." "No," he corrected her, his voice thick with emotion. "We saved us. I almost lost everything because I chased a quick win. The mistake didn't break me. It taught me that sustainability, quality, and community are the only foundations worth building on." But the story wasn't just about paying the debt. It was about the transformation that followed. His small goods business continued to flourish, fueled by his dedicated following. But more importantly, people began reaching out, not for phone stands, but for advice. They saw his journey and needed to know how he turned shame into hustle, how he found the resilience to start over. Ethan realized his true calling wasn't in the wood, it was in the lesson. A year after making the final payment, Powderson Woodworks had organically grown into a thriving enterprise. But the real victory was what Ethan did next. He launched an online course, not about woodworking, but about reinvention. He titled it fittingly, "The $1,000,000 Lesson: How to Turn Your Biggest Mistake into Your Blueprint." He didn't make $1,000,000 overnight, but the revenue from the small goods and the coaching, driven by the authenticity of his personal journey, finally surpassed at initial debt by 100-fold. The value of the lesson, discipline, humility, authenticity, and the unwavering courage to keep showing up was the true wealth. On his 35th birthday, he stood in his expanded, bustling workshop, the old eviction notice long since replaced by a framed photograph of his first walnut phone stand. Clara walked in, handing him a mug of coffee. "Happy birthday, founder," she smiled. He took the mug, his gaze sweeping over the tools, the materials, and the happy noise of his employees. You know, that $10,000 mistake, he said, a genuine smile replacing the haunted look of 3 years prior. It was the best investment I ever made. It bought me the knowledge that my value isn't tied to my net worth, but to my grit. He had started over with nothing but his hands and a shattered ego. He hadn't just repaid a debt, he had redefined success, proving that the foundation of the American dream isn't about avoiding failure, but having the courage to rebuild your life on the bedrock of the lessons learned from it. The pain was real, but the transformation was ultimate, proving that sometimes the only way to achieve real strength is to first be completely broken. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to MindBridge Tales. Every story here is a lesson. Every lesson is a step toward a better life. God bless you.